Welcome to the History Maven. This video will take us from the outer dimensions of the universe to an iconic moment on a scooter as we count down the top 5 weirdest Beatles theories and scandals. If you missed 6 through 10 of our list, check out the description box below for the link to part 1. But first, Beatles estate lawyers, please note, this video is for entertainment purposes only. None of the claims discussed in this video have been proven factual. Number 5. UFO. John Lennon told Interview magazine that on August 23, 1974, he was chilling naked on his balcony with girlfriend May Pang in New York when they witnessed a UFO over New York City. Lennon swore that he hadn't so much as hit the bong that day. He was just enjoying the breeze on his giblets and the view of the sparkling New York City skyline when he saw a thing with ordinary electric light bulbs flashing on and off around the bottom, one non-blinking red light on top. It was a UFO, said May Pang. She described it as shaped like a flattened cone, and on top was a large, brilliant red light, not pulsating as on any of the aircraft we'd seen heading for a landing at Newark Airport. When it came a little closer, we could make out a row or circle of white lines that ran around the entire rim of the craft. These were also flashing on and off. John was thrilled. He'd had a lifelong love of space. He admitted, "We even called the police. That's how excited we were. And they told us to keep calm, that others had seen it too." I apologize for that accent. John's magician and psychic friend, Uri Geller, said John told him of a second alien encounter in which small beings visited him in his bed. He allegedly told Geller that beings stunned him with their minds, showed him his whole life, which he said was a beautiful thing, and they left him a gold egg-like ball of metal, which he then gave to Geller. John couldn't shake the feeling that the sighting had left him. He commemorated that night on the balcony by including references to it on his Walls and Bridges album. He also made several drawings of the experience. You see, John had always believed in UFOs and aliens, and he was always searching the skies for a sign of extraterrestrial life. He even suspected that aliens might have visited him as a child and given him his unique way of seeing the world. It's completely possible that his bad eyesight and wishful thinking turned an ordinary plane sighting into something extraordinary in his mind. But, check this out, weirdly, 2 days later, on August 25th, residents of Cayome, Mexico, claimed they saw a disc collide mid-air with a small plane. According to dozens of witnesses, Mexican soldiers were dispersed to the scene, but were found dead when backup arrived. Well, the U.S. military offered assistance, but Mexico said, "No, thank you, but come on, this is the U.S. we're talking about." So they showed up anyway. And they were floored by the flying saucer and the mountain of dead Mexican soldiers. The U.S. Army carted off the disc, burned the small plane, and buried the soldiers' corpses. The official response was later given that a cocaine-filled cargo plane had crashed as they headed to the U.S. Now, you might say Lennon was a dreamer, but he wasn't the only one. See, I'm mildly skeptical about UFOs, but I think that far into the future, time travel may become feasible, and there's no way that someone isn't going to make an effort to warn John Lennon about his 1980 assassination. I mean, if I were a bug-eyed, big-headed future human, that's exactly what I'd do. Number 4, the demo from another dimension. In 2009, a website popped up at thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com, and the site contained a free album called Everyday Chemistry. The site owner offered his name as James Richard, which is a play off of Paul and Ringo's first names. And he told the story of a man named Jonas who came from a parallel universe where the Beatles never broke up. Jonas gifted the album to James Richard and asked him to share it with the world. Could this be an album from a parallel universe? Could one of the remaining Beatles members have put this on the internet? In reality, this apocryphal story and album is a remix, and a very good one, of Beatles songs and solo works from John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Here's a soundbite of my favorite of the Everyday Chemistry album. It's called I'm Just Sitting Here, and I think you're going to be able to pick out some familiar elements from Beatles songs. People still crazy, doing what I do in my, oh. If you're dying to hear the full story in the songs, and I think you'll like them, those will be linked in the description. But hey, hang tight because we're coming up on number 3. Number 3, Ringo versus the Terrorists, aka the plot to assassinate Ringo. In 1964, the Beatles were belting Please Please Me and shaking their shaggy doos across the states on their North American tour that was to cement their star status. They popped up into Toronto for the usual scream-filled stadium of panty-tossing teens. Montreal was the next tour stop. But in the 1960s, Quebec was having a moment due to the separatist movement, which is exactly what you think it was. It was the French-speaking provinces of Canada wanting independence from their English-speaking counterparts. But I mean, it's Canada, so it was all handled very nicely and politely, right?
Oh, hell no! Oh, hell
The Quebec Liberation Front actually started regular bombings from 1963 to 1964. Another group, the Army of Quebec Liberation, robbed a firearms store and killed 2 employees. They planned to do far worse once they were equipped with ample weapons, and one of those things was to kill Ringo Starr. As the Beatles neared Montreal, threats began to circulate that a terrorist group planned to make an example of Ringo for his Jewish heritage. Later, Ringo would recall, "Some people decided to make an example of me as an English Jew. The one major fault is I'm not Jewish. Threats we took in our stride. I mean, suddenly there'd be a few more cops. But this was one of the few times I was really worried. We were playing the gig, and as always, I was on the high-riser. I had the cymbals up toward the audience to give me a bit of protection. I usually had them flat." Y'all, these accents are going to continue. I apologize. A police guard was assigned to Ringo, but as he said, "If someone's in the audience and they have a shot at me, what's this guy going to do? Is he going to catch the bullet?" Starr got through one gig in Montreal that day without being assassinated, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was not just another empty threat. The Beatles decided it wasn't worth the risk. They canceled the last concert and booked a flight to sunny Florida. Few people know that the first of the many death theories about the Beatles started with Ringo in this incident. As far as scandals go, this is more of a Canadian scandal than a Beatles scandal, but it's hard to imagine that anyone would ever want to hurt the charming Ringo Starr, so it had to be included. Number 2, Paul is dead. You knew this moment was coming. Number 2 on the list of Beatles theories and scandals is the Paul is dead theory. From the start of their careers, the Beatles had been the topic of rumors. They'd all been the objective of death rumors. But when Paul McCartney crashed his moped in 1966 on the M1, it led to a few bruises and a chipped tooth. However, the story passed around the fandom was that Paul had died. It became obvious this wasn't true, but then guess what? Paul crashed his car again and won a car this time, not a moped. And the death rumor flared up again, but then Paul made Sgt. Pepper and all was well, and Paul was believed to be very much alive at that point. But let's jump ahead to 1969. Radio DJ Russ Gibb was taking call-in requests from listeners when one young man told him, "Put on that Beatles song, Revolution No. 9, but hey, play it backwards." The DJ did this on the air, and he said he heard the phrase, "Turn me on, dead man." The theory that took shape was that Paul was killed in an auto accident and that Beatles manager Brian Epstein found a lookalike by the name of William Campbell. They sometimes called him Billy Shears, and they had him take Paul's place. The Beatles left breadcrumbs for fans to follow because they were hoping to reveal the truth deeply because they harbored so much guilt about secretly replacing their bandmate. All the fans started assembling clues, which they believed would prove Paul died in 1966. Even reputable newspapers were printing this theory. I won't go down the extensive list of proof that Paul is dead, but some of the evidence includes the Abbey Road album, which is believed to depict John as the priest in white, Ringo in black as the Undertaker, George in denim as a gravedigger, and Paul barefoot as a corpse. The proponents of this theory also argue that Strawberry Fields Forever contains a garbled line in which John says, "I buried Paul." Crank your volume. Okay, volume down. John told everyone he was saying cranberry sauce. What do you think? It was said that Sgt. Pepper album was a photo staging Paul's funeral. Some say the yellow flowers at the bottom of the cover partially spelled out the name Paul. Do you think this theory holds water? Obviously, Paul is dead is merely an urban legend. It became and remains one of the biggest conspiracy theories of all time because, hey, we humans love mysteries. We love searching for clues and questing for the truth. And this gave Beatles fans an interactive way to engage with the Beatles and with one another. And here it is, folks. Number 1, all the Beatles were replaced except Paul. The Paul is dead theory must have ticked off a few people who could not stand the idea of the cute Beatle being killed off and replaced with a clone. This all the Beatles were replaced theory sees Paul continuing in the Beatles and the rest of the boys dying in their early 20s only to be secretly swapped out with some doppelgangers. The Paul is alive theory was born in the early days of the internet forums, where one poster on a Beatles forum gave evidence to support his hypothesis. He stated that Ringo died in 1963, and we know this because his face is not in line with the others on the cover of With the Beatles. He speculated that George died in 1964 because he has his back to the camera on the cover of A Hard Day's Night. John died in 1965 because Help uses flag semaphore to spell out NUJV on the cover, which to him stood for New Unknown John Vocalist. I'll link the post with all the clues, but clearly what the forum dude was trying to illustrate is that you can find evidence to support any theory you want to prove. In the end, it's all just hogwash. I know I left out some of the weird theories and scandals, so drop those in the comments. What I missed, let me know. And while you're down there trolling in my comments, leave a little love in the form of a thumbs up or click on the subscribe button. And in the words of Ringo, peace and love. Maven out. Thanks for being here.